Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here and 4Ks. And boy, let me tell you, 2023 has not been a great year for me in some ways, but in terms of my favorites, some of my favorite movies getting 4K releases that are really nice, 2023 has been pretty fantastic. Because, we got After Hours, again, one of my very favorite movies, finally on 4K from Criterion. Really, really great disc. And we got a 4K of Rio Bravo, another one of my all-timers from Warner Brothers. And now we're going to talk about another big, big one for me, and that's John Frankenheimer's film The Train from 1964. With Burt Lancaster. Truly a movie that I mean, it's just like a perfect film for me. It's right up there with Carpenter's The Thing, movies that I just cannot find any issue with and that I get so caught up in when I watch. This one is World War II set. It is in France. Burt Lancaster plays a French character named Labiche. He works at a train yard. He's a train man. And the major conflict is between him and a Nazi colonel played by Paul Scofield, who's really good in this movie too. And the idea is that we open on Paul Scofield's character walking into a makeshift museum that is a bunch of French paintings that basically the Scofield character has sort of stolen and wants to further steal and take to Germany because he's sort of I guess he's an art lover, and he just likes the idea of having these paintings. There are like tons of paintings from Gauguin, Picasso, Van Gogh, Renoir, Monet, Degas, Cézanne. When they actually get boxed up to be put on the train, you see how many paintings. It's like 19 Picassos or something. So you have these incredible, one-of-a-kind French works of art, and he wants to steal them and own them more or less himself, but he definitely wants the German army to have them, and he's made it his mission to get them back to Berlin. And so he wants to put them on this train. He boxes them up, and they put them on this train. And so this whole movie, the conflict is really about some French folks not wanting the Germans to get their, art heritage, their, this representation of their country. And both the Labiche character and the Colonel character are so determined and so stubborn. And by the way, Paul Scofield, I was like, why do I remember? I mean, he's been in a bunch of movies, but most recently I watched Quiz Show, and in 1984, so I mean that's 30 years after this film, but he plays the elder Van Doren, Ralph Fiennes' dad, the professor guy in Quiz Show. And I was like, oh, that's why I remember him. Okay. But he's so good in this because he's so determined and so evil and just such not a nice man. And a lot of people sort of band together in this movie to stop this train from getting to Berlin. And there's a lot of people that end up getting killed over these paintings. And at first, Labiche, the Burt Lancaster character, is even like, what? No, I'm not going to risk people's lives over some paintings. But eventually it becomes a battle of wills between him and this colonel. And it's also a battle of like cleverness, like how to delay. I mean, there's all kinds. It's a man on or a guys on a mission movie, but there's all kinds of like little missions. Like at one point, there's an armored train that's trying to get out of the sort of railway station that Labiche is at, and he's asked to delay the train by 10 minutes so that the Allied bombing forces, which are going to show up at like 10 a.m., can bomb the crap out of it and stop it from being used at all, because it's like one of these trains that's like armored, it's got guns on it and all this stuff. So Labiche is like, how are we going to delay it for 10 minutes? And how they end up doing it is very clever. Like, you know, one guy pulls a train, because it's one of the train yards where all the tracks meet, and they're able to sort of back one train up and accidentally put it on the track in front of that train. And then like the Germans are getting mad, but it's like it seems like a simple mistake. Like they're fulfilling the idea that these people are idiots and that they just have to deal with them. So it's not a killable offense per se, but they're actually incredibly smart. All the French folks are. And later on in the movie, Labiche meets up with a character played by Jeanne Moreau, of course, great French actress, did tons of good stuff, including, you know, some stuff with Antonioni and Truffaut, and she's very good in this. She runs like a small inn, and at first is very much like, I don't want to get involved with this, which is most people's attitudes, because they realize that they could be killed. And again, the Germans are absolutely ruthless in this movie. Anybody caught doing anything that could be even conceived as halfway sabotage is shot, and anybody helping those people are shot, you know, and we see that. So it's pretty brutal, and the stakes are high. But I just adore this film. You know, John Frankenheimer, one of my favorite directors. Seconds, really great. Rock Hudson movie you should check out. But this is the fourth film between Frankenheimer and Burt Lancaster. So obviously they got along really well. I think they're both very, you know, forceful personalities. If you see Frankenheimer interviewed, you see him on set, like he's almost a military man in that sense. Like he's a commanding presence, like truly. And he gets what he wants, and his films turn out really great. But so he had done The Young Savages with Burt in 1961, Birdman of Alcatraz, I think one of their most known collaborations, in 1962, and then additionally in 1964 they made 7 Days in May, which is a really great paranoid thriller before the 70s paranoid thrillers. Really good stuff. So that's the same year as The Train. I think the 7 Days in May have a Blu-ray. It might. I think it might. So anyway, this is their fourth film. I think they would do another one with the Gypsy Moths. Is he in the Gypsy Moths? I'm pretty sure that's after this. It's a cool skydiving, kind of like what's the I'll have to think of it. But there's another Douglas Sirk movie, Tarnished Angels. It's a little like a Tarnished Angels kind of thing, except they're skydivers instead of pilots. Anyway, this movie is fantastic. And this is a new 4K Ultra HD from Kino. Brand new HDR and Dolby Vision Master from a 4K scan of the original 35 camera negative, and it looks great. I love black and white in 4K, and this has, like I've always say, just really good detail, and the grain is there. It's a really neat movie. It's only 1:6:1, so you will see just slight bars on the edge of your widescreen televisions, but it still looks great, and it's got some old features that are ported over, but they are all enjoyable, especially the audio commentary from Frankenheimer himself, which is really, really good. It's a little sparse. He can be sort of sparse in some spots. Like, again, he's a guy who just does what he wants. So he's going to talk when he wants to talk. But listening to him talk about the difficulties of making this film, the difficulties of using real trains and crashing real trains, and there's some really cool, train crashes in this that are totally obviously real and pretty epic. And there's some good pyrotechnics because there's bombings that are happening, so they're using explosives, and it's a good solid action thriller in the World War II area. But yeah, it's just such a good movie, man. I just cannot praise it enough. And everybody that I've heard from that, heard about it, we talk about it a lot on Pure Cinema. Elric and I are both gigantic fans of this film. And so we've heard from some folks that have heard the podcast and listened to them or saw the movie, and I haven't heard a single person be like, yeah, it was just okay. It's just great because it really just builds and builds and builds. And the cat and mouse continues between Schofield and Lancaster, and they just won't give up. Neither one will give up. Who will win, and at what cost, I think is a big theme of the movie, ultimately. Because, again, this is towards the end of World War II, so, the time is running out for the Germans ultimately anyway. And that's a great backdrop, I think, for this particular story. So it's just truly fantastic. So you have that commentary from Frankenheimer, then you have an audio commentary from film historian, filmmaker Steve Mitchell, and Stephen J. Rubin, who wrote a book called Combat Films, American Realism. And those two are good together, and they talk about some of the specifics of this film, and yeah, very, very solid tracks, both of those. There's an isolated score track by Maurice Jarre, and a 1964 Making of the Train promotional featurette, black and white, rough black and white, which spends a lot of its 6.5 minute running time talking about the pyrotechnics, really trying to make this look like an exciting movie, which it is. But yeah, it's interesting too that it's black and white in 64. I mean, The Apartment is isn't it the last black and white movie to win Best Picture in 1960? And in 1960, it was kind of not a thing to really do black and white movies. But I think this has to be black and white. I don't know. It just needs that extra level of cinema to it that I just wouldn't. I don't know. In color, it would be a little different. I love the black and white of this movie. Anyway, so this is truly, truly epic. It comes with a 4K and a Blu-ray. And it also comes with a booklet, which is not included in a ton of Kino releases. This booklet has a reprint of the Julie Kirgo essay, which I think was on the original. The Train's been released a bunch. Train, I think, originally came out on Blu-ray from Twilight Time. And then Kino did at least one reissue, maybe two. And now we're getting it in 4K. So you have the 4K with the commentaries and the Blu-ray with the other extra features. But this, it's great to have Julie Kirgo's words in that booklet because she did a great job with that essay. So that's an extra something. But yeah, between Rio Bravo, After Hours, and The Train, 3 of my top 10 movies of all time getting nice releases on 4K in 2023. So I couldn't be happier about that. Now, next up we have a really enjoyable one from Michael Cimino. His debut feature film, Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, from 1974. So 10 years after The Train. And this one is a really special movie. It's got this sort of great meandering 70s road movie script from Michael Cimino. He had apparently worked with Eastwood on Magnum Force. I think John Milius had started the script. If you look at the credits, Ted Post ended up directing the film, but Milius started the script and I think had to abandon it or couldn't, fulfill his duties as screenwriter because he had, I think, gotten his first directing job and so had to bail on it. And Eastwood approached Cimino to say, hey, can you finish this script so we can get going on this? And Cimino was very nervous about it, I think, because he didn't know how to write a Dirty Harry movie. Magnum Force is the second after the mega success of Dirty Harry, and Cimino was underconfident. But he found a way to get it done, and the script turned out well, and the movie made a ton of money for Warner Brothers, and I think that helped him cement his relationship with Clint. And so when he went to make Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, he got Clint on board, and that's a pretty big deal to get a big star like that. Like, Eastwood was probably the biggest star in Hollywood in 1974, or among them. And to get this guy in your movie when you're starting out is pretty fantastic. And then to get Jeff Bridges, who's very young and still getting started, but still obviously great, that's just a team that you can't beat, right? So Thunderbolt and Lightfoot is basically the story of an aging bank robber who ends up getting his gang back together to organize a new heist. And his gang includes, Jeffrey Lewis, George Kennedy, and these guys are like chasing him at the beginning of the movie. But he runs into, it's got a really great opening. I'm sorry I'm so all over the place, but this movie's a lot of fun and very much an of the 70s kind of movie. Great opening sequence. You have a church like in the middle of nowhere. Eastwood with bifocals is on stage giving a sermon that sounds ridiculous. Like you listen to some of the stuff he says and you're like, I think he's just sort of making stuff up off of what he might remember having heard secondhand about some Bible verses. And they're very silly, but the whole script is kind of like that. It's got a quirky feeling to it. And in walks, I think it's Kennedy, and he just starts shooting at Eastwood, and the whole church clears out, and Eastwood runs out the back and is just booking it through a cornfield. Meanwhile, we see a great scene with Jeff Bridges' character. He's Lightfoot, and he is at a used car dealership, and he walks up to the dealership, suddenly stiffens up one leg and starts limping, and walks over to a really beautiful, I think it's a blue Corvette or white Corvette. I don't remember, but it's a Corvette. And the guy who's, the salesman guy's like, hey, what do you think? This is a beauty, it's barely got 100 miles on it. And he's like, go on in, start it up. And so Jeff Bridges sits down and gets in there and starts revving the engine. And then he says something about how much, and the guy's like, well, I don't know if he says 3,000 or something. And then Bridges talks about his wooden leg, which he doesn't have, and just joking with the guy, and then just sort of takes off with the car, just steals it. And that's the kind of character we're dealing with, a very footloose kind of dude who is a grifter. And he's driving down the road, and then we connect back with Eastwood, who's coming out of that cornfield and just about gets hit by Jeff Bridges' character, who ends up sort of nicking George Kennedy. And then they take off together, and they start to become friends, and they get on this sort of road movie adventure. And Eastwood's character is kind of revitalized, and I think that's why he decides ultimately to turn this into a heist. But that doesn't happen for this, I think that's the second hour of the movie, the heist comes into it. So that's pretty great, because it's two movie types that I like are road movies and heist movies, and there aren't enough road heist movies, in my opinion, and this one is a really good one. Like I said, supporting cast is pretty great. Catherine Bach from the Dukes of Hazzard, Daisy Duke herself, shows up at one point. Gary Busey shows up. Bill McKinney has a really bizarre cameo role that's like something out of Two-Lane Blacktop, where the guys get in. He's got a really crazy hot rod that's boosted up and back. He's got a rabid raccoon in a cage in the front seat, and they have to sit in back. And then there's some stuff with some bunnies that I'm not going to go into, but it's pretty nuts. And it's immediately when you see Bill McKinney, you're like, oh, that's the dude from Deliverance, and maybe I don't want to get a ride with him. That's probably not a good idea. Other folks that show up, Vic Tayback. I love Vic Tayback from Alice. And Dub Taylor just has a little bit part as a guy running a service station. There's just a great bit where he's talking to Thunderbolt and Lightfoot in one car, and this wife and husband are in another car, and the husband's flipping through his cards, I guess to get the Diners Club card or whatever credit card. And so he'll be talking to Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, and he'll look over at the guy and he'll be like, that's not it. And then he'll go back talking to them, and the guy just keeps flipping through his cards, and he's like, that's not it. And he finally gets the right card. Anyway, just Dub Taylor, who I weirdly remember from the Hubba Bubba bubblegum commercials. But he is a long-time character actor, did tons of great stuff, showed up in tons of movies. I just love seeing him in anything. He's just got a great face and just like one of the really memorable character actors of all time in tons of Westerns. He's at home in a Western. It's almost weird to see him in a modern film, but I still love it. Anyway, so this movie is great. I am a huge fan of it. It probably is ultimately my favorite Cimino film, I think, which is a bummer when a guy starts out. So, I mean, yeah, he made The Deer Hunter. I get it. It's a great movie, but this is more my speed, this kind of movie. And it's an impactful film, despite its looseness and its silliness in the script. These characters are quite memorable. Jeff Bridges does a wonderful job. I mean, Eastwood's great. And I love that one of the things Cimino told Jeff Bridges at the beginning of the film was, your job is to make Clint Eastwood laugh. We've never seen him laugh, and he's very serious in his films. And there's some good little bits where they have great camaraderie, and they do kind of crack each other up. Yeah, so I really dug that. But anyway, it's been a favorite for a long time. It's a really nice looking 4K. This is another brand new HDR Dolby Vision Master from a 4K scan of the 35 original camera negative. And yeah, it's really something else. Oh, I'm just looking at the rest of the Jack Dodson is in the cast, Burton Gilliam, Roy Jensen, and Gregory Walcott are all part of the supporting cast. These are character actors from this period, folks you'll definitely recognize, So Cimino, would go on from this to make, obviously, a bunch of, films that people remember, but he would basically follow this with The Deer Hunter 4 years later, and then Heaven's Gate in 1980, which obviously a big financial failure, and hurt United Artists, hurt the studio system, and hurt the whole idea of New Hollywood in some ways. But is, I think, actually a really great movie if you haven't seen the Criterion Blu-ray of that. But then, Year of the Dragon, and he did a remake of Desperate Hours, and he didn't make a ton of movies, interestingly, but, he made some good ones for sure. R.I.P. Anyway, so this one is This one has some nice features. It has an audio commentary from Nick Pinkerton, and this is ported over from the previous release. Pinkerton is just a really enjoyable dude in my mind. A dude you'd want to hang out with if you're a film geek, because he just knows his stuff and he speaks in a certain way. He has a certain cadence that he's really a character, this Pinkerton fella, and I like him a lot. So he's got a lot of cool things to say about the background of this film and the actors and the production and all that. It's wonderful stuff. Again, he's up there with like a Kim Newman type, or a Sam Deegan type. Like these guys, these folks really know what they're doing. This also has something called For the Love of Characters, featurette with director Michael Cimino, which is about 28 minutes, 42 seconds. Seems to be some kind of featurette from a French release, because the titles of the films are listed in French, but is basically extracts from an audio interview with Cimino. And that's where I heard about, the Magnum Force story and, just in general, his ideas for starting a script with character and how he has to start with that and find a name for his character, a unique to them name, and then he can really start writing. And he talks about directing Clint Eastwood and how Eastwood is like John Wayne, and they just have this star power, and just also how generous Eastwood was with helping people, like giving camera operators opportunities as cinematographers and so forth, and that this warmth and want to help people is part of the reason he's been so successful and such a big star in Hollywood. He also talks about Jeff Bridges, and it's a neat interview, mostly showing clips from the movies and stuff. But anyway, it's a good-looking transfer. This is a widescreen movie, 2:35:1, and it looks very nice, like the best I've ever seen it look. And so I'm very excited that Kino continues to just knock it out of the park with these 4K releases from some of the great I mean, these are cult movies, but they're becoming more known all the time. And you can see, like, The Train and Thunderbolt and Lightfoot are very different movies, but they have very fervent fan bases. And I guess that's the cult I'm talking about. Like, people that know these movies love these movies. And when they see them, they want to share them with people. I mean, that's what a cult movie is, you know? It really inspires you to want to, you know, get other people to watch it and spread the word. And that's how these films build their reputations. So you got two really great ones out from Kino on 4K. Highly, highly recommended. The Train is probably going to be among my favorite discs of the year. That having to do with certainly the extras, but definitely the movie as well. So definitely check these out and keep an eye on what Kino Lorber is up to, because they are announcing new stuff all the time, including tons of 4Ks. And I love to see these keep coming. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.